Hey guys, what's up? It's Jenna. Welcome to Belin Youth Group at Home Edition. I am so glad you guys are joining us. And this week we are talking about influence in our series Popular. And I don't know about you, but when I hear the word influence, I tend to think of the term bad influence, like don't hang out with that person, they're a bad influence. I remember when I was in middle school, the rapper Eminem was a big deal, and everyone, like a lot of adults, were saying, don't listen to that, that is a bad influence, it's going to change your language and you're going to say more cuss words. And so many people were like, oh, it's not going to influence me. And I saw so many people saying so many more cuss words that were word for word out of those songs. And so that's kind of like influence. You might think bad influence, but influence in general is this ability or potential that you might have to change something about someone, like who they are, what they think, or how they live their lives. So you might have heard a lot from like your parents or other people, like don't watch that movie, don't watch that show, don't hang out with those kids, they're bad influence. Maybe you sound familiar, adults telling you these kinds of things. Or maybe you're on that other side where maybe you have a lot of younger cousins or younger siblings, or you're around younger kids and everyone's always telling you don't be a bad influence, make sure you're responsible, or you better watch what you do because your little brother's watching you. So you might hear don't be a bad influence on the people in your life, or maybe you hear not to hang out with those people because they're bad influence on you. Or you hear this and it's really frustrating, but the reason why people are saying it is because they love you. They're not trying to be strict or kill all the fun in your life, believe it or not. They want to protect you from people or things that might prevent you from living the fullest and best life. But can we be honest? Sometimes the thought of being a good influence just seems like so much responsibility, and it can be a pretty big weight to carry. Like you have to be perfect. And I know that a lot of us already feel this pressure to do everything right and be perfect already. The other side of it is like sometimes trying to be this good influence can just not always seem as fun as what everybody else is doing, right? Like it's kind of a little bit of a killjoy. And so here's the thing, when we talk about influence in these kinds of ways, I think we're missing the big picture. We're kind of just boiling it down to if you make bad decisions, you're a bad influence. And if you make good decisions, then you are a good influence. But if you think about it, I would say while our choices and behaviors do have a lot to do with our influence, I think there's a bigger picture and there's a lot more going on. Maybe more than we realize. So there's a cool part of the Bible that I'd really like to share with you. It's from one of my absolute favorite parts of scriptures, and this takes place right after Jesus came to earth and the early church started. And you see there were these guys who started leading this movement of the Jesus way, what we know as Christianity. And they weren't the most popular people on the planet. They weren't famous. They didn't have technology. They didn't have TikTok or anything like that. No, they were just like a group of people who believed in Jesus, and they began to follow his teachings and wanted to share those teachings with others. And these guys were known as the apostles of the church, which is another way to say these guys were the leaders and the teachers of the early Christianity movement. One of these guys, his name was Peter, and Peter was actually called by Jesus himself to be one of the leaders of the early church movement. Now, here's what's interesting about Peter. Peter wasn't always the best decision maker. Actually, if you read stories in the Bible, he sometimes had a reputation of being angry and cowardly, and even a little bit of a liar at times. And still, this is one of the guys that Jesus chose to spread his message. Here's what I think is so cool about that. Jesus knew that Peter's ability to influence people wasn't just about his choices in the behavior. It was about God working in him. Jesus saw that. Peter had influence not because of anything he did or didn't do. Peter had influence because God gave it to him. All Peter had to do was say yes, one step at a time. And that is exactly what he did. Let's look at the scripture in Acts to see what happened as a result of that. All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders, and all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. Today we know this passage describes the first picture of the Christian church. But back then, I don't know if the guys who were part of it knew what they were building. Peter and his community were simply using whatever influence they had. They were using their influence to help other people follow the way of Jesus and what they had been called to do, to love God and to love others. They weren't saying yes to being good influences. Rather, they were saying yes to following Jesus. They were saying yes for God using them. Were they the most popular guys? Probably not. Did they see results right away? Nope. Did they get the credit they deserved? Not always. But they still kept going. But they used their influence for good, for God. And that gave them the motivation to keep going and taking each small step in the name of God, using what they had. One small step at a time. Peter and his pals who were in the early church, they weren't about just trying to influence people. That wasn't their main motive. They wanted others to see the story of Jesus and know who he was. Honestly, many of them probably never even thought they could have any influence. Many of them started out as lowly fishermen. And those small steps started a movement that shaped an entire community. Let me show you what I mean. Step 1. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to spending time with each other. Step 2. They let God work through them and were amazed by all that God did. Step 3. They found common ground with others. Step 4. They gave to those who were in need, no matter the cost. Step 5. They shared meals together at home and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Step 6. They praised God together. Step 7. As a result of all these things, God grew their church every day. You see, each one of these small steps inched this group closer and closer to having big influence. Each step may have seemed small and insignificant when it was taken, but it moved them in big ways towards big influence. And the same can be true for you. You can take small steps every single day that inch you closer and closer towards using your influence for good. Because doing big things starts with small steps. Your ability to influence others starts with small steps over time. The more steps you take toward being a positive influence, the more impact that influence will make on someone. So for example, I had a great friend in high school that I met named Laura, and Laura was just awesome. She really cared about other people. She was always very genuine, great listener, and I really enjoyed her company. And she had invited me to youth group a couple times, and I loved spending time with her because she just radiated that kind of kindness for other people. And so eventually I went, and I was so glad I did. It definitely shaped my life. I started going to youth group, and I learned more and more about this God who is just incredible and has this great plan of restoration and healing for the world. And that was because of Laura. And look, she did not have to be the most popular person in the world, or the most popular person in the school, or most popular person in her grade. She just had a relationship with me that took time, small steps over time, that had an impact on me that was profound. Till then, I ended up becoming that person who invited people to youth group. And now I lead youth group online. Those small steps can influence people in huge ways. And the same can be true for you. I think you can be an incredible source of somebody who influences other people for good. And you do not have to be the most liked person in the world, the most popular person at school, or have the most TikTok followers or people on Twitter. You just have to start taking small steps to get there. So here's some things I want you to think about. Think about how and in what way you want to influence others. Do you want to be someone who influences others to serve, to be kind, to be generous, to be friendly, to help those in need? What is it that you want to influence the people around you to do? And then secondly, take one small step. If you want to influence other people to be kind, then find more ways to be kind. It's kind of like that saying, be the change you want to see in the world. If you want to see a world of people who are more generous, then maybe it's time to take that money that you earn from your job or some of your allowance and set that aside to give to those in need. Maybe invite somebody to hang out with. If you want to see people be inclusive, maybe it's time to start offering some of your skills for free in a spirit of generosity, in the spirit of loving and serving others. Remember, doing big things starts with small steps. And maybe you're thinking, look, Jenna, I hear what you're saying, and I know you said that really it's not a big thing about your behavior, and that's not like your primary way of influencing. It's about what God does for you, but through you, but like you don't know what I've done. And if that's you, we're definitely going to talk about that next week. So I hope you will join us. There are so many people in the Bible who have stories of times that they've just really blew it, but God uses them in amazing ways. And it's really all about these small steps. No matter who you are or what you've done, I know God will use you to be an incredible influence for good as you take one small step at a time. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for joining us at Belin Youth Group at Home Edition. I will see you real soon. How do you play with these anyway? I think it has something to do with the numbers. I don't know, it's really more fun just to knock them down, right?